everyone, this is Dean on the scene, and welcome to the latest edition of Snapshots, where we talk to the people who make the entertainment world go round. On this edition of Snapshots, we are continuing our series of interviews in preparation for the upcoming Farpoint 31 convention, which is currently in its brand new location, the DoubleTree by Hilton in Pikesville, Maryland. It's happening on February 9th through the 11th, 2024. Our guest today is described as the Julia Child of Science, and we have her here on our Snapshots. She is a tattooed one-woman STEM career panel with recognition as a researcher, a speaker, an engineer, and a consultant before her current career. She currently called Los Angeles home, working as a writer and a producer. And she is the queen of science, ladies and gentlemen. She is the science consultant for the Star Trek franchise. We are talking Picard, Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Discovery, currently and coming to an end for its fifth and final season. So everyone, let's pay attention to our resident astrophysicist. We have here Dr. Erin MacDonald. Erin, welcome to Snapshots.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for the delightful intro. That was very kind.
Well, you are well deserved, especially I think you are the very first scientist I believe we have ever interviewed in over 15 years of doing this.
Hey. Well, there's not a ton of us in the entertainment industry, so that's fair. That makes sense.
No, they're not, but I'm glad that you're tied with Star Trek, you're tied with science. So it's a great combination. It's great to have here, especially since you're coming to Farpoint in the next few weeks or so.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I've never been to Farpoint, but I've heard great things about this convention. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, let me ask you this first question. What are you looking forward to coming to Farpoint, coming to the East Coast?
Well, I think a lot of these fan conventions that are very regional and have been around for a long time, they all have like a very different vibe to them. There's like people who go all the time, regular people, they have their like found family, the friends that they catch up with once a year at this convention. And so it's just that atmosphere that I really, really enjoy. And that's the fun thing about going to a new one is discovering what that atmosphere is and what makes it so special to the regulars.
Well, absolutely, especially since I've been a regular to Farpoint for 25 years now. In fact, my first one was 1998, and I've been going on and off ever since. So this is a great convention for you to come over to our area.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I heard it's going to be in a new location, which always changes things. I definitely sympathize with that, but yes, I'm sure it'll still be great.
Yes, in fact, I'm trying to hold back tears that this is the first time in all of 25 years we're going to a new location in Pikesville, the DoubleTree Hilton, when we have to just say goodbye to the Hunt Valley Marriott, which has been our home for so long a time.
Yeah, it is sad. There's a lot of memories in all of these different locations that, people, again, have spent all that time at. But, the people are going to be the same and it'll still be a great atmosphere.
Absolutely it is. All right, so let's go back in time. Because I know what my first exposure to science, I want you to tell us, there we go, trying to get my words right. Tell us about your first experience into the wonderful world that is science.
Well, I think, I like to say that most people are born scientists, that this is sort of how we discover, the world and how the world works. You learn that when you touch something that might be hot or sharp, not touch it again. And that's all science, right? And you start to piece all these clues together. And so we're all naturally born scientists. But as we get older, sometimes that interest wanes. Sometimes it can be a teacher. It can be a bad experience in a classroom that can turn you off of it. Or it's just not for you, which is also fine. For me, what excited me the most is like, I was always really, I grew up in the 90s. And so I was lucky to have like Jurassic Park hit me at just the right age. That was sort of seeing that like being a scientist was a job. And then I also watched the X-Files. And so seeing a scientist, fight aliens. And so realizing that you could literally just go and study something that you love for the rest of your life was something that really excited me. And I was just super into space. And without necessarily a career plan, when I went off to university, I was just excited to go and study space for 4 years.
Oh, absolutely. Especially you got your Bachelor of Arts in both astrophysics and mathematics, and you earned your PhD in astrophysics. In fact, you going along the X Files, you credited Dana Scully and Catherine Janeway, who you acknowledged in your dissertation, with providing you the inspiration to pursue a science career. And I'd like to know why those two women, exceptional women, inspired you to pursue a career in science.
Well, I think the Dana Scully one was a little bit more on the superficial side in the sense of like I was a little redheaded girl watching a redheaded woman, and it goes to that, conversation that we have about representation matters. That you see people who look like you on the TV screen, that can make you realize the stuff that you didn't necessarily think that you could do. We have tons of evidence of that, not just my own anecdote, but that's a well documented phenomenon.
Mhm.
When it came to Janeway, that was a little bit later in my career
Okay.
where I didn't necessarily have, it was more like in graduate school, but I didn't really have mentors necessarily of like women in particular that I saw myself as. Like there wasn't any people that I could see their career trajectory and go, okay, that's what I'm interested in doing. That's the path I'd like to follow. I'd like to talk to you more about that. I just didn't have that. But I watched Star Trek Voyager, and Captain Janeway was like the type of leader I wanted to be. She handled conflict the way that, I would hope that I would be able to. She problem solved, she interacted with people in a way that like felt comfortable to me. And so I really started treating Captain Janeway as a mentor. And I think that speaks to how important it is to not just have like the tokenism characters, but to have a variety. Because I had, a woman I was doing my PhD with who was more on the engineering side. She loved B'Elanna Torres. Like I never related to B'Elanna Torres, but this woman did. And so having a lot of diverse representation means that certain characters, you find those traits that you're like, okay, I really relate to this one. And that's how I was with Janeway.
That's wonderful, and I'm glad you were able to tell us the story. In fact, I had something similar that when I grew up, I watched Jim Vance, who is our former local anchor here in Washington, D.C. And years later, once I started becoming a reporter, I actually got to thank him for being an inspiration to me. Did you thank Jillian and Kate for being an inspiration to you in person?
I have never met Gillian Anderson. I would die. She tagged me in an Instagram post during the WGA strike, and because I took a picture with David Duchovny, who showed up to the Fox studios, and she was like, redhead representation, and I was like, oh my God, that's the close I've got. I did have a chance actually to meet Kate Mulgrew a couple times. The first time was before I even worked at Star Trek, but I was speaking at conventions and teaching science there. And she
Nice.
was going to be there. And so I brought my dissertation and asked if she could sign the dedication to Captain Janeway. And she was like incredibly moved. I
Oh,
couldn't speak because it was Captain Janeway. So it was just a beautiful, awkward fan moment that lives in a happy place in my heart.
that is wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Now, how did you transition from being a scientist with an astrophysicist degree to landing what can be considered by a lot of people the ultimate gig, becoming the science advisor for Star Trek? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's not a direct path, I will say, but but part of what drove me in that direction was the fact that I kind of mentioned when I wanted to become a scientist, it was motivated by film and television,
Mhm.
and I never lost that. And that's always something that like I wanted to be a part of the storytelling industry to some extent. And so when I left academia, going to these conventions and speaking and just teaching science using science fiction is something that's really kind of core to my interests and what I do. And yeah, just over the years of finding those integrations between science and science fiction and how to communicate that to different audiences, landed me on CBS's radar, and they started inviting me to their official events. And so that's kind of how I got in the loop as all these other shows were starting to come along, and they were interested in bringing on science advisors. So I started on season 3 of Star Trek Discovery when they changed showrunners.
Yeah.
And it was alongside a colleague of mine, Professor Mohammed Noor. He was brought on for the biology. I was brought on for the astrophysics. And then because I was in Los Angeles at the time, we thought, well, let's make this a gig. This has always been a legacy of Star Trek to have scientists involved. And I think what's key is that, yes, I'm a scientist, but I also love stories. And you really have to be able to acknowledge that the science doesn't reign supreme and that the stories and the characters have to come first. And so a lot of what I do is working with these writers to try to tell the best story possible with a strong backbone of science. So there are times where we do have to make compromises, but my main job is to make sure we don't say anything blatantly wrong, and to continue that legacy of a pretty science grounded television series.
Excellent. In fact, I read that you mentioned that one of your favorite episodes that you worked on was Memento Mori on Strange New Worlds. And I want you to tell us why that particular story.
Yeah, so Strange New Worlds was fun because that was one of the first shows that I was brought in from the beginning. Because I was brought in for season 2 of Lower Decks, season 2 of Picard, season 3 of Discovery. And
Mm.
so Strange New Worlds was kind of there from the beginning. And so I got a chance to work really closely with those writers and build that relationship from day one. And what was great with that was Memento Mori, they come to you with an idea, vague idea
Yeah.
of like, we want to do like a Hunt for Red October space adventure story. What cool science could we do to make that happen? And so when you're given that sort of open assignment to throw out a bunch of different ideas and kind of see what sticks, that's a lot of fun. So having something like a brown dwarf instead of a gas giant, or instead of, a star or nebula or whatever else we could have, we specifically made it a brown dwarf. And then it's going around a black hole, and we have to have a ticking clock. You have to have something that makes it feel like the action is progressing. And so the idea that this black hole is like stripping the layers of the brown dwarf that's going to eventually expose them, like,
Mm.
it's all very heightened science, but it's fun, and it's still rooted in some science that's there, and I really enjoy that. And just to have a really strong science episode, but all the science just lives in the background and just carries all the action along, I think is like a perfect kind of storytelling marriage for me.
It is. And you know what? When it comes to science, it makes the best stories when it comes to Star Trek. It doesn't have to be all space battles and negotiation. We got to have that science because after all, we're in the 24th, 25th, and the 32nd century. So we got to explore what's out there and still remain the heart of being explorers in science fiction.
Exactly.
Now, how does it feel to be honored within the Trek franchise? I mean, you got to voice character named after you in the first season of Prodigy. You have a character named after you in Lower Decks. So how does it feel to be officially in depth into the franchise, not just being the science advisor, but voicing a character and having a character named after you?
Yeah, it's a honestly speechless, still can't really process it that it's a thing. It that kind of came about jokingly initially in Lower Decks when they were at the end of season 2, and it was the most science episode I had done for Lower Decks, where they're dealing with like a plasma storm and all of this, and they have to strip the outer hull of the Cerritos and stuff. And
Yeah.
at one point, they all conflict over what they can and can't do. And in the cacophony, Shax just shouts, "Dr. Aaron said we can't do that." And that was like a very just sort of improv, goofy background thing. But, they were like, "Oh, we put you in there. We put you in there." And then with Prodigy, to take that one step further,
Mm-hmm.
the idea that, the kids get to meet a scientist. And one of the characters, my favorite character, Rock Talk, she's a young girl who wants to become a scientist,
Yes.
and we had talked a lot about that importance. And so that was a lot of the science advising I was doing, was more STEM education in that front. And so it the showrunners were kind enough to be like, well, it makes sense that Rock Talk would meet Dr. Erin, and have Erin give her that little last push to figure out what she wants to do. And so yeah, it's incredibly humbling. It's only myself and Stephen Hawking who have ever played themselves in Star Trek.
Yes, and we got
So,
to add one more scientist, Dr. Mae Jemison, even though she didn't play herself, but
yes,
she was featured in Star
right.
Trek. And it's funny enough that you mentioned Rock Top because we had the daughter of Riley Alice Rocky, and she was at the last. She was, I guess, at the last Far Point last year.
Awesome. Yeah, she's great. She's so fantastic. It's such a great character.
Indeed. And also with Mae Jemison, I actually am a chapter president, and our club is named the Starship Mae Jemison, which is very cool.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's just a phenomenal inspiration and such a cool person.
She is indeed. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that after our interview, of course.
Sounds good.
But I want to talk to you about that since I read that you actually released a book for pocketbooks called Star Trek, My First Book of Space. And I read a little bit and it's great, exciting stuff. I wish I had this when I was teaching in the math science program when I was a math science teacher. So for those who have not read this book, I want you to talk about this book and how did you bring it down to the level of youth to tell them about space,
Yeah.
its finest frontier, and that this is a wonderful, wonderful topic to talk about and to get them into at a young age.
Yeah, thank you. It's incredibly difficult to write science books for 0 to 2 years old age group. And a lot of it is, it's more for the parents than anything. And so the key things that I wanted to get across with this book was to introduce space in a very structured way. And there's lots of different ways to sort of start introducing space to kids, but for me, I like to start thinking about that address because that was something that really clicked with me when I was growing up, is that, you have your house that's on a street, that's in a town, that's, in a state and in a country. And so continuing that on to say you live in a planet that's in a star system, that's in a galaxy, that's in a galaxy cluster, and just extend that all out, I think is something that is approachable for kids.
Mhm.
And the text of the book itself, the science is all science, but it is called Star Trek, My First Book of Space, so it's filled with science references. And we took great care. The great artist Jason did a good job of marrying official NASA and ESA photographs with cartoons of Star Trek ships. And so there's really a delineation of like the science and then the Star Trek sort of overlay to the book. And it was a blast, but I'll tell you, those board books, it's like 11 sentences and it takes a long time to write that.
Oh, I believe it. From writing it to teaching it, to teach at that age is a challenge, but at the end of the day, it's well worth it. Especially we want the future scientists to
Yeah.
explore beyond Mars and beyond our galaxy.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know what's going to just stick with someone for the rest of their life. I mean, I'm sure we all have a memory where a teacher said something that was super inspiring, or maybe was the opposite of that, that might have just been an offhand comment on a bad day, but it sticks with you for the rest of your life. And so giving all those opportunities in these books and these talks and everything, it's just because you never know what is going to affect that one kid that one time at the right point in their life that could possibly change their course.
Absolutely. Why do you feel it is very important that we must continue the STEM programs in schools everywhere?
Um, I think, science, technology, engineering, math, all of those are core to the progression of humanity. and our ability to continue surviving. We're dealing with a climate crisis, and that is caused from the innovations that have been made by humans over the last centuries. And we're only going to get out of that with science. And there's things that there's elements of how to protect our society. There's elements of how to ensure our survival, whether that's on an individual level through medicine and medical innovations, or on a broad scale with things like climate and industry and energy sources. And then on top of that, you have things like space exploration, which on its surface, I just deeply love because I feel like it's the one thing that truly unifies us as a species is that we're all stuck on this little rock together. And space exploration reminds us of that. We remind ourselves that like we are small, we only have each other and we only have this rock. And so that humbling existentialist aspect of space exploration, I think, is crucial to our species.
Indeed, it is. Aside from meeting your fans, taking pictures, getting autographs, what will you be doing at Farpoint 31? Will you be doing a panel, a science panel?
Yeah, I'm going to be giving a talk. I don't know the details yet, but I'm going to
Awesome.
give a talk on space time and Star Trek.
Ooh,
So it'll be a little bit of science, a little bit of gravity, and then we'll just be a lot of Star Trek references and deep cuts. And we'll really lean into the Star Trekness of it all. It'll be super fun. And then I'll be doing a Q&A as well the following day. So people will have a chance to ask more questions. I have no doubt we're going to run out of time on my first one. So we can ask them all the following day. And then I'm just excited to meet people, see the different local organizations that are there, meet the folks in the area, and honestly, just get a chance to nerd out about Star Trek. Like, I'm a fan myself, and I love being among fans and debating merits of favorite episodes and best characters. And I live for that environment.
and now I just got into a new question. Since you mentioned you're a fan of Star Trek, aside from the current series you are working on, what is your favorite series, movie, character?
Ooh, okay. Ooh. Okay, so favorite series is Deep Space Nine.
Ooh.
Love, love, love Deep Space Nine.
Mhm.
Voyager is a very close second, but Deep Space Nine is my favorite. My favorite movie, oh, I gotta say Voyage Home. Like there's a lot that are up there. From the original series to Next Gen to the Kelvin universe. All of those they're great.
Yes.
Um, if we count Galaxy Quest, then Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
That's my favorite movie. That's my favorite movie of
Yes,
all
we
time.
can count Galaxy Quest because
Okay.
I'm actually skipped a Star Trek convention when I found out that four of the cast members from Galaxy Quest were going to be in WinterCon. It's like, sorry guys, it's Galaxy Quest, and I've been wanting to meet the navigator, helmsman, Tommy Weber for years. I'm going there.
Yes, yes. Laredo, Tommy Weber. I actually have a tattoo of the NSEA protector from Galaxy Quest on my arm, so it
Hey.
is my favorite movie. And then you asked favorite character. So favorite captain is Janeway,
All
but I
right.
think favorite character is Garrick from Deep Space Nine. I just
Cool.
layered, complex, funny, deep. I every time he shows up on the screen, I'm just glued to it. Those are great episodes, and he's just such an enigmatic character. One of my favorite experiences of all time in the Star Trek world was on the Star Trek cruise last year. Andy Robinson, who played Garrick, was on it,
Yes.
and he did a reading of his book about Garrick's past called A Stitch in Time. And
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite books. I have it signed by him. But to be there for his reading, and he was so in the character and just 100% in it, was like a magical experience. And yeah, I'll cherish that forever.
Sensational. You know, I have never been on a Star Trek cruise yet.
They're fun. I'm gonna be on it this year. It's at the end of February, so shortly after Farpoint. But yeah, they're like they call it the unconventional voyage, and I think that's appropriate because it's about the tenth of a people of the convention for twice as long, and we're
Mhm.
all stuck on a boat together. But it's all Star Trek all the time, and it's really fun.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you covered one of my next questions. What's next for you? So we now know you're going to be on the Star Trek cruise at the end of February. What else is coming up for you?
Um, well, other than that, I'm focusing on writing for career-wise. I think the next step for me is to start following the path of the prior science advisors who went on to write on shows. Andre Bermanis and Naren Shakar have become showrunners and executive producers, and that's kind of a career path that I want to go down. So I'm focusing on writing this year. I have a short film I'm hoping to make. I have another short film in post-production called
Ooh.
Identities, which is a Nebula original written and directed by Jesse Gender, who does a lot of Star Trek commentary on YouTube.
Mhm.
And then, of course, there's more Star Trek to come. So we have season 5 of Discovery coming up, and I'm excited for everyone to see that and send it off well. We would not be where we are with Star Trek right now without Star Trek Discovery. So
Yes, I cannot believe it's been, wow, almost 7 years since it began, and we're going to lose our first
I know.
renaissance of Star Trek again.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for the young and up and coming scientists to be?
Ooh. Um, I would say the best advice I have is just be true to yourself, keep that inspiration going. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. And don't be afraid to pivot. You'll find new things, find new opportunities that might be a little out of that path that you saw for yourself. Just take it and run with it. One of my favorite quotes is from Lucille Ball. And she says, there's no such thing as luck. Luck is hard work and knowing an opportunity and what's not. And I really hold that dear. And I think if you follow that advice, that can get you pretty far. So thank you.
And that's a great quote. Now I'm going to have to put that in my collection of favorite quotes now.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yep.
Did you mention moments ago that you want to follow in under Brahmas as far as science writing? Is there a show right now that, other than Star Trek, you would love to write for eventually?
Ooh, I mean, I'm a huge nerd, and there's a lot of good sci-fi out there. Foundation is a great show.
Yes.
I really have been enjoying watching that. Um, and then even shows like Loki. Loki for me is just a delight. It's so character driven, but then the stuff they do with time travel, again, it's like that perfect marriage I talked about where the science is like this strong backbone, but then
Yes.
it's all just fun and adventures on top of that. And so those are my favorite kind of stories to tell, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed. There's so much good TV out there these days.
Yeah, tell me about it. I just got finished with For All Mankind, which is one of my favorite series, and every season it's just getting better and brilliant, and it's like, ah.
So much good stuff.
Right. And especially, the alternate universe and seeing that montage at the beginning of the season and what has changed. And it's like,
Mhm.
it is so believable that these things, if they were different, if we were the alternate universe, I can believe this would have happened.
Yeah, it's great. And it's so funny too, because I do believe like science fiction is a huge spectrum that you have hard science where it's more science, more fiction, and then lots of places in between. And it's fun to have stuff that anyone can find something that they enjoy. And I think that's true for Star Trek right now as well, that Star Trek has so many different types of shows out there. You don't have to like them all. We're living in a golden age of Star Trek. So watch what you like, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, like, you're right, because there's plenty of Star Trek, like there's plenty of Doctor Who, there's plenty of Star Wars. You can't just like everything. You just pick your favorite and just roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can we find you on social media for those who may not be able to attend Farpoint in a few weeks, but they will want to follow you after seeing our interview?
No worries. I am mostly on Instagram at Dr. Erin Mac, DRERINMAC. Same handle on Blue Sky if any folks are over there being nerdy and awesome. Um, And then I also have, I forgot one more thing to plug, but there's a new book coming out from Nerd Night called How to Make Friends and Influence Fungi. And I have an essay in there on space-time. So it'll be pretty much a Cliff Notes version of the talk that I'm giving at Farpoint. And there's a lot of just great, fun, esoteric, nerdy stories in that book. And so that's coming out at the end of February. So be sure to check that out. And then last one, I have a YouTube channel called Dr. Erin Explains the Universe. And it's been dormant for a while, but we've got videos in the pipeline. So be sure to subscribe to that.
Ooh, so we're gonna have to make sure we include that link, and the link is right here at the bottom. So please subscribe to Dr. MacDonald. And this is Dean on the scene for the Rogers Review. Until we meet again, my friends, live long and prosper, peace and long life. And as Q says, but I always say, see you out there.